moderator. I actually just wanted to go ahead and provide you with a very brief background. If you're not familiar with the 74, we are a media entity. We focus primarily on K through 12 education. So we cover all sorts of news, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and everything in between. And we also try and amplify voices such as yours to ensure that we are really talking about these education issues in a way that humanizes this narrative. Oftentimes that's not the case, and we're trying to change that day by day. I know, as a former educator, one of the most political things you can do is to educate an individual. So we are hosting these town hall events to be able to once again dive into this discussion in an authentic and compelling manner, and also be able to understand the pros and cons associated with the different systems that we use to educate our kids. We know that our students of color, primarily our Black students, deserve so much better than what they're getting right now. So we're going to go ahead and get the show started. Thank you so much once again for being here, and I hope that you all can engage in this topic, not just today, but moving forward. If you're interested in collaborating with the 74, please hit me up. Yes, it's a shameless plug, and I look forward to interacting with you all as well. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Charles Guilford, who is one of the pastors here at the Potter's House of Denver. Let's go ahead and give him a round of applause.
Hey family, first of all, it is good to see so many community members. It feels like a family reunion up in here. So good to see everybody's wonderful faces. So really more than anything else, my role is just to first and foremost welcome you all to this church, to this place of worship. On behalf of our senior pastor, Teray Roberts, and his wife, First Lady Sarah Jakes Roberts, we want to welcome you to this house. Really, our heart behind supporting and facilitating this event is really our heart in general is to be a community gathering space, to have these kind of discussions, to have these kind of conversations that will allow for folks to be able to live their best life and be able to move forward in the way that makes sense to them. So thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully you're able to grab something to eat, and we want to welcome you into this wonderful house. That being said, I have the distinct honor of introducing our moderator for the evening. He is none other than Roland Martin. Go ahead. I am biased for several reasons as to why he's such an outstanding brother, but at the end of the day, really am grateful to have somebody who engages on national dialogues pertinent to different issues and to different things that we see across this great nation come to our state, come to our city to facilitate a conversation that pertains to our kids and our community in a unique way. So that being said, I would like to welcome a visionary leader, a man who is strong and believes in his values and convictions, a man none other than Roland Martin. Appreciate you, sir. Let's go ahead and give him a warm welcome.
Thank you so very much. If our panelists can come on out. Come on out, please. Just come on out. Don't be afraid. Glad to see all of you here. I'm not happy about y'all weather. I'm not trying to experience cold this early. I'm from Houston. I prefer 75, 80. It does not matter. Wherever y'all want to see, wherever y'all want to sit down, up to you. Up to you. So I'll explain how we got to this point. There are a number of issues that people often want me to speak on, to embrace, to be involved in, and I mostly say no to those, largely because of the role of a journalist. But I come from a family of educators. My wife is a certified educator. She was a vice president, dean of education of a community college. And one of the things that was interesting with that community college in Chicago, they spent $40 million a year on remedial education. So essentially that community college was a 13th grade. And they were coming from the city of Chicago public schools. So that spoke volumes about the quality of education that was happening in Chicago if they had to spend that much money in the city college system when it came to remedial education. And this is, forget everything, every other issue you hear, this is absolutely the civil rights issue of the 21st century. Because you can look at any stat. If you go to most prisons anywhere in the country, 90% of those folks with those prisons are illiterate. When you begin to look at where we stand when it comes to economics, so much of that's tied to education. And so I went to a magnet school in elementary school. I went to two elementary schools, magnet school for half of my elementary school years, and then my high school, which was in Jack Keats High School, is one of the most historic black high schools in Houston. Felicia Rashad, Davy Allen, others graduated from that high school. And when I spent 3 years studying this movement, studying the school choice movement, ed choice, parental choice, whatever you actually want to call it. School reform, ed reform, they got all kinds of different names. And what I decided to focus on, which is why my wife and I founded School Choice is the Black Choice, because the fundamental problem that I had with this entire movement is that we live in a country now where majority of the children who go to public schools are black and brown, but the ed reform movement is largely white-led. And what I said is, you cannot have a movement that involves black and brown children if you do not have black and brown folks leading it and in charge of it. If you saw the last debate, Senator Kamala Harris, when she talked about the numbers, if a black child by the third grade has a one black teacher, by the fourth grade has a second black teacher, the more likelihood they're able to go to college greatly increases. And so I said, we have to begin to speak to this issue. And let me be real clear. K, all the way through college, I went to public schools. I've driven by private schools, never been to one. Never thought about going one. We ain't have enough money to go to a private school on any level. And so it's always interesting when I hear folks talk, when we have these discussions, because they somehow believe, oh, you must be one of those brothers. Nope, nice try. Grew up in a black neighborhood, black family, went to black churches, went to all black schools. So you could try everything you want to, it ain't gonna work on me, because I've been around black folks. I've run 3 black newspapers, black website, black magazine, worked for 2 black networks. And so if you try to challenge the black card, you ain't gonna win. But somebody has to speak to this issue, because what we are seeing in this country, if we look at the current education numbers in this country, our children, when this nation becomes a nation majority of people of color in 24 years, will not be able to qualify for most jobs in this country. And we are on the path of looking like South Africa, where people of color will be in the majority, will not be able to take advantage of those demographics when it comes to economics, when it comes to every single system. And that, to me, is simply an abomination. And this generation cannot be silent when it comes to this issue. And for me, I don't get involved in all of the silly back and forth. I have one goal. What is success? I don't care where our kids go. Traditional public, charter, magnet, homeschool, online school, tech school, take your pick. If it is teaching our children and they're successful, I will support it. But if it is failing our children, traditional, charter, magnet, home, online tech, I will say shut it down. I cannot support failure. So with that said, what I want to do, I'm going to go down the line. I'm going to start on the far left-hand side. I want you to actually introduce yourself to everybody in the room. Tell them your name, your title, who you are, and then we'll go down, we'll get this thing started.
What's up, everybody? My name is James Coleman. I'm the state representative for Colorado's House District 7, far northeast Denver. Thank you very much. And then also, I'm the executive director of Faith Bridge, a nonprofit that's focused on partnering with our churches and our communities to support them and connect with them to improve education for children across the state of Colorado. And I'm excited to be here also as a parent of 2 children who are in Denver Public Schools and a husband of an amazing wife who gets to be the HR director and serve at the school where our children go, having more diversity in our teaching and in our staff at our school, and hoping that model is something that can flow across the rest of the city and the state.
Cool.
Wisdom Amuzum, co-founder and executive director of a school called Empower Community High School. What's most important, thank you, all set. What's most important for me is I was born in Togo, moved to the States with my family when I was 9. I grew up in Aurora, went to A Hills, Gateway High School, graduated from CU Boulder, and in 3 simple sentences, what's special about Empower? 1, it was co-created by a community design team of students, parents and teachers who broke bread twice a month over 2 years. 2, our school model is grounded in transformative resistance. 3, we believe in shared power with students, shared power with parents.
Good evening.
Do those students sharing the bills? I'm just go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Sincere Soul Ashemu. I'm a Denver native, one of the few that are left, I suppose. Born and raised here. I went to Howard University, HU in the house. Spent 10 years in West Africa, Ghana, West Africa, where I lived with my children, raising my family. I came back, started an organization called Breaking Our Chains to help dismantle and disrupt the preschool to prison pipeline. Formed a coalition called Our Voice, Our Schools that's set upon disrupting and dismantling the preschool to prison pipeline, working with black parents to maneuver and to navigate within this white supremacist system, school system that we're dealing with.
Good evening. Good evening in church. My name is Jennifer Bacon, and I currently serve on the Denver Public Schools Board of Education representing District 4, which is the largest district, the best district, 5 points to the airport. And so I am honored to be here. I really ran for office so that people of color could really pursue self-determination in education, and also to hold our district accountable to living up to the values in which we espouse, which includes equity, but also includes inclusion, just more than diversity, and kind of the checklist that diversity tends to be. And so part of my role is to figure out actually the role of system and what it means to be publicly held accountable to build something that is responsible for everyone's children for the majority of the day. So thank you for having me here today.
Good evening. My name is Deborah Hendricks, and I am from Colorado Springs. So I run an organization called Parents Challenge, and we work with low-income families around their educational choice, whether it be private, public, charter, homeschool, online, whatever the parent's choice is. I've been running that organization for about 6 years, and we work with all of the schools in the El Paso County area. I am a Howard graduate as well, and excited about being here and sharing my focus as it relates to the parental role of choice in education.
Good evening, everybody. Papa with the African Leadership Group, an organization that exists to help facilitate the professional integration of African immigrants. Been around for the last 15 years, and I'm sitting here to be part of this conversation and look forward to share with you as African immigrant. We never had the opportunity to matter where we can be part of this conversation. It's truly an honor to represent that entire community where education means everything to us. And when we talk about choice, we are representing a community where we got to start by explaining what it means. And I look forward to talk more, and thank you for having me.
General questions. How many students are in this school district? How many students? 93,000? In Denver. The 93,000 students in Denver, how many of those students are in traditional schools and how many are in charter schools or non-traditional schools?
So, there's like the metro area, my guess would be up to a third across the metro area. So that includes Denver, Aurora, right, Adams, and so forth.
So a third in choice schools and 2/3 in traditional schools.
Yes, we call our schools a little bit differently here. We have innovation status in Denver, as well as district run and charter. And so a third are charter, if that provides, for the wonks in the room, you all know what I'm talking about.
So in terms of black academic performance. How are black students in this area performing when it comes to whatever your standards are, whatever your state levels are, what percentage are on level proficient, and then just give folks a sense of that.
Sure. So if you didn't hear, I'll speak for Denver Public Schools. We have about 93,000 students. Just for context, about 5 years ago, black students were 16% of DPS. We're down to close to 12%. We have released our state data. I am the author of a resolution titled the Black Excellence Resolution, because when we look at our data, African American students exchange with our indigenous students when it comes to the lowest performance in the district. And so broadly speaking, on our test data, which is CMAS, from elementary school to high school, which includes the Colorado SAT, if you're black in DPS, you have, as high as you have, is a 1 in 5 chance of being on grade level. And so that's the data that the district carries. Now, it varies by
On grade
school.
level in all subjects?
Yes. So we test in math and language arts, for example. Our percentage in proficiencies between 14% and 21% across all grades, but the average is around 17, 18 percentage point. Like
For black students? 17 or 18%?
Yes.
So that means that 82% of black students are not on proficient level.
Right.
Okay. Now, which category was that? Yeah, that was that across the board?
Across the board. We have 2 different tests. So our grade level and proficiency are according to those tests. But yes, in math and language arts, we're perform lower in math than we do in language arts. Actually, I want to say that it varies by middle school or high school, but that bandwidth, that's what we're talking about, like at best 20%.
At best, so 80% not proficient, at best 20% proficient. Okay. So we talked about, again, a third charter in terms of students. Number of schools. I want to know the number of traditional schools, the number of charter schools. Just want to get a sense of the actual schools. Anybody has that?
I don't know if I have the actual, I can look that up.
You have it?
I can tell you in Colorado Springs, but
Yeah.
not here.
Go ahead, that's fine.
So in our Colorado Springs, which is El Paso County area, we have 210 traditional schools. We have 54 private schools. We have 37 charter schools and many homeschool associations.
Okay. Okay. So 210 traditional, 37 charter schools. Got it. I'm going to throw this question out to the whole panel, and anyone can answer it. I'm not calling anyone in particular. I have traveled this country. We've had these town halls, and we've been to Philadelphia, D.C., Tulsa, Charleston, South Carolina, Atlanta, Nashville, Chicago. And what is perplexing to me is that 6% of all students nationwide attend charter schools. 94% attend traditional schools. Yet there is this view that charter schools are causing all of the problems with the traditional schools. And I'm trying to understand how 6% can cause the problem of the 94%. So the biggest question for me is, why can't 2 things exist at the same time if they are working? Anybody?
I'll take that one. So I think the question, I think in your statement there's some things that need to be clarified, right? And one of the first things is that we have to understand that traditional testing and being on task, and that in itself is not a measurement of success, especially for black children. We know that the tests that they give to our children are white biased, right? So we have to account for that as well. Now, accounting for, I don't know who exactly is making the argument or who you're speaking to that's making the argument that people who are for traditional schools are blaming all the problems on charter schools. I don't know who that is.
I've had 50 or so conversations like this, and that's what I consistently hear. We just dealt in I was in California with Margaret Fortune, where there was a bill put forth where they wanted to put a moratorium on charter schools because the traditional schools were saying that their budget shortfalls were being caused by the charter schools, when if you looked at the proficiency level, the charter schools are outperforming them. And so I'm going, what about the students? And so you have folks who are literally saying that, oh, this is the reason why we can't meet our budget, because money's being siphoned off over here when actually the charters are still public schools. So, I mean, so I've gotten that all up. Well, it is. I mean, so.
Well, yeah, I mean, so again, that's what we're here to talk about. Some people would argue, and I would be one of them, that charter schools are not public schools. They get public money, but they have private boards. They have their own discipline policies. Their books are not held to the same type of scrutiny that traditional schools are. The only thing public about charter schools is the money that we give to them.
Not just that. Hold up.
Right.
1 second. In this city, who authorizes charter schools?
The DPS.
And who is DPS?
They're public schools. It's
Precisely.
a public.
So the public school system here authorizes the charters.
Exactly.
And those are still public charter schools. Now
They are public charter schools,
Yes.
but they don't operate the same way traditional schools
do,
right?
Right, I'm fully aware.
Okay.
Which is the point of it. So, for instance, which is the point is because when you talk to folks like Steve Perry, when you talk to folks like Tim King, when you talk to folks like that who run charter schools, they have far more flexibility to be able to craft curriculums that they want. In fact, it's interesting. Before we came out here, there was a woman who was talking about. She was in the back representing. She was talking about the importance of arts and other forms, dance, things along those lines. So here's what happens. When you look at traditional public schools, they've cut many of that out. If I run a charter school, I control the curriculum.
So let me just hop in just real quick and just make my point here about traditional and charter. I want to say unequivocally to my community that I am not anti-charter. I'm pro-black people wherever I find them, whether they're in charter schools, traditional schools, whether they are in magnet schools, wherever, home schools, like Sister said, I'm for it wherever we find black people. However, I'm very clear that this idea of choice is what we call back in the day a MIC game, being run by rich white people in order to extract public dollars off of public education. For example, Rupert Murdoch, your boy Trump's favorite homeboy, said this about public education is a $500 billion industry that we can use to empower our investors. So that's the way that they're looking at public education. Where did choice come from? Just real quickly. The word choice came from in 1957 when we passed Brown versus Board, right? I'm gonna keep it 100 with you. When we passed Brown versus Board, there was a huge uproar by white folks to say that they didn't want to integrate and they didn't want to cause equity. So what did they do? They created choice. And what happened is Senator Harry Byrd of Virginia called for choice, and white people fled out of public education. That's the history of the word choice. That's the history of this thing that we're talking about, choice. So then what happened when they fled out is that some school districts, including Little Rock, shut completely down. They would rather close these schools than integrate with black people. That's where choice comes from. And so when we're having this conversation on this stage right now, we're talking about choice. Let's be very clear. It is white people that are dictating this conversation even as we speak right now.
So
let's be very clear about that. We have, I'm going to land, and then I'm going to pass the mic. Don't turn the lights off quite yet. I'm going to get there.
They on.
I got 30, give me 30 more seconds. Yeah, let's keep the mic working too.
The mic is working. Go ahead.
So when we talk about choice, it is white people, rich white people. It's the Bill Gates and Melinda Gates Foundation. It's the Broad Foundation. It's the cat with Walmart that are pushing these conversations about talking about choice for us. If you really want to see what choice looks like and who's governing the conversation with choice, this is the board of directors for the boards of 74 who's holding this conversation. How many, does that look like choice to y'all? How many black people y'all see on that? So when I say that this is a conversation back in 1957 that was dictated by white supremacy, I'm saying today in 2019, I don't care. He who pays the piper picks the tune. We are blessed and endeavored to have one of the best pipers that we have ever produced in this country as far as journalism, and I'm glad that he's here. But who is paying him, and what tune are they talking about?
Now, let me ask you this question. Name me a system in America white folks didn't create. No. Hold on. See,
Okay, I can name you. You asked a question.
No, hold up. But see, I'm about to unpack it.
Is that a question?
No. It's a question, and anybody can respond to it, but here's the piece. You can't show me a system in America white folks did not create that was instituted for us not to take advantage of.
Okay, so I can name you several systems that black folks instituted. The breakfast program was instituted by the Black Panthers. That's a system that we created.
Yes, but here's the point I'm making.
You asked, I'm answering.
When we talk about schools, if you go back to read James D. Anderson's book, The Education of Blacks in the South, 1860 to 1935, the reality is it was free slaves who got in state legislatures who made it taxpayer-funded education in the South. We saw what happened, of course, after Reconstruction with the Great Compromise of 1877 when they said, fine, we're going to shut all this sort of stuff down. So we have been fighting this all the time. What I am saying is white folks can create whatever they want to create, but if there is a system that allows black folks to be able to control the curriculum and control the school and control the contracts and control the education of our kids, you damn right we should be at the table saying we want one of those schools.
So let's talk about
and
it.
That representative, one second, and that representative, it is in place. And so the question for you is what we are seeing across the country, right now is an increase of black folks having self-determination and taking over charters. Group of Deltas in Detroit opened their own charter school. We're seeing an increase in that. Steve Perry, Diddy came to him and he said, Diddy said, I don't want to sponsor scholarships. He said, I want to fund a school. Now they're going their 4th and 5th school. Tim King is expanding as well. Friendship Public Charter School in Washington, D.C. They've expanded beyond that to other states as well. You are seeing black folks who say now we can control schools. Are you seeing the same thing in this state?
No.
And I'm asking him. And so the question is, what needs to happen in this state for black folks to run their own charters and run their own schools?
So,
why are we framing it like it has to be charters?
No. Hold on. First of all, I didn't frame like it has to be charters.
That's what you said.
First of all, if you have traditional schools, you already have traditional schools. If you have charters which allow for an individual to be able to say, I can create my own school, the system allows you to do that. And here's the deal. Can black folks go in and run their own traditional school?
Yes.
No. But can they literally come in and say, okay, I want to create my own curriculum, take over this school, but you're doing it within the district system?
I've done it.
Good. So what I'm saying is, I want us to do both of those.
Okay, but this is the
so
thing.
Hold on.
Hold
1 second. I want the representative to answer the question. Are you seeing the expansion and what needs to happen in this state for more black folks to be able to control, and that is run those charter schools? That's what I'm talking about.
So the answer is yes, and I want to start off before I give specific examples of where that's happening by saying sometimes what the enemy meant for bad, God meant for good. I'm a Christian man, and there's some people who ride around on horses with white sheets over their head and call themselves Christians too. There's people that come into our community sometimes and they misconstrue what it is that we say we believe in. We get into a conversation right now that is pure entertainment. This is not about choice. This is about freedom. And what I'm saying in terms of what kind of options we have out there, we have people like Dr. Offset, who you just mentioned, who has a performing arts school that she's opening up next year for black kids who are in 6th grade, and she's looking for 100 students. We recently had our school board approve a school that is a HBCU STEAM-style academy here in our state, here in our community. I think the issue is not whether or not it's possible. I think the issue is we have to truly believe and change the mindset that this belongs to us. We all pay taxes. We all have ownership of this. but we can't even walk into a school building without feeling like we don't have any authority. Once you realize that you have the power, if you only knew the power that you had, you could walk in and say, I want to have a school model created by my people that is going to impact and engage students of color in a way that we have never seen it done before. So I don't want us to talk about choice, blanket statement in a negative sense. I think there's bad actors in everything, and I think we call those people out. And if we don't call them out as much as we have, we need to do more of that. But what we have to do is take in the opportunity to look at opportunities for us to create options for our students. And also look at all skin folk and kinfolk. You have some folks who say that they represent the community as a whole. I'm getting so tired of being in conversations about choice when our students are struggling. This is about kids. It's not about adults. It's not about any of that. It's about per capita anywhere in the state of Colorado. If you're a black student and you live in Douglas County, which is the 9th richest school district in the country, if you're black per capita, you're still the lowest academic performer. It's not about that. It's about standards and expectations we have for our students. And I applaud my brother right here, and I'm going to say this on the mic. We are going to leave from here, and we're going to have constructive conversation. He's already invited me to come to the school where he's at, where he's working at. I visited. I've been there. He's working in the community to figure out a way for us to engage our black students in a way that has not been done, that was actually initiated to do so, and then they took away programs from us, and he's trying to put them back. So I applaud you in that. The issue, again, is not choice. It's about freedom. It's a mindset. And when you walk into a public school or a traditional or district run or a charter, whatever that is, you have ownership of that. And I expect the same high quality access standards for my 2 children as I do for everybody in here. So we can sit up here and put on a good show for everybody, or we can walk out of this room with a plan to improve education for the students, especially the least of these. There's less black people in the state of Colorado. There's 4%. In the city and county of Denver, there's 11. If there's less of us, how are we being failed the most?
Deborah, I got to ask you this question, Deborah. I got to ask you this question. Because when I hear 80% not proficient, I was in Selma, and we had a session there. There's a sister who was on our panel. She was the most art and charter opponent on the State Board of Education. And I was asking, it was a brother with the Alabama Education Association, and he was saying that, he said the answer to all these problems, he said, is full funding. And then I asked him, I said, okay, have you ever been fully funded? He said, yes. I said, okay. I said, what were your numbers when you were fully funded? He said, well, they're higher than now. I said, no, I need you to give me a number. That's not an answer. The answer that came back essentially is that the black students were at 5% proficiency. And I said, you were dealing with 95% not proficient. And what was interesting about the conversation is that most people in the room came there completely against the idea of changing the current system, but they had never heard that number. You're dealing with parents. What are black parents telling you about the schools that their kids are going into, and what do they want to see? I'm going to go Deborah first.
So one of the things as we listen about this whole conversation, education is about children. And when we forget to have that conversation in terms of how do we set up children for success, the biggest component that we have to keep on the table is parental involvement. Parental involvement. When parents are drive-by parents, drop-off parents, they don't engage in what's going on in their child's education unless their kid is getting an award for something, or there's a sports activity, or there's a music program. They don't know what's happening in the classroom. Well, how can you support your child? First of all, we as parents, we are our child's first teacher, not the schools. We are our child's first teacher. So if you don't engage in what's happening in the classroom, how can you then know whether or not your kid is learning? You know, we wait for invitation to come to parent-teacher conferences. Parent-teacher conferences start the first day you take your child to school. You should be connecting with the teacher, the principal, the counselor, and anybody else who can provide support for your child. And that's one of the things as part of the program that I run, is that it's all about parents' involvement. You knowing what's happening and you then providing or getting access to the support to help your child be successful. Because that's your child. It's not the school systems. So when you go back to that question about the public school and charter schools and private schools or whatever, they don't own our children. As a parent, I make the decision what's in my child's best interest. And I made choices to put my child in public schools, in charter schools. I threatened to homeschool them, but they knew that was a joke. But we've got to make sure that if a school's not working for our child, you don't just keep taking them there and hoping it gets better. You have to get engaged and figure out, if it's not working, are there resources to help, or do I need to take them somewhere else that is going to better meet my child's needs? And I think that's one of the conversations we leave off the table. When I talk about choice, we make choices in everything else. What car we drive, what house we live in, what clothes we wear, what restaurants we go to. So why shouldn't we have the same choice around our education of our children? That's one of the primary components. As a parent, that's my number one, this is my number one asset, my children. And I need to make sure I'm doing right by them. Regardless of the system, I've got to make sure that I'm doing what's in their best interest. I have served on Harrison School District 2 School Board for 8 years. I served on Colorado Early Colleges School Board, which is a charter school, for 12 years. And when I served on the Harrison board, the question always said, well, how can you serve on our school board and your kids go to a charter school? I said, well, let me tell you this. I'm a parent first. And when this school is doing right by kids, then my kids will go here. But when it's not doing right by kids, I'm going to put them where I think they will get the best education.
Jennifer, do you have an example? Do you have an example of a traditional school that was not doing well, and then you had a turnaround effort where you had improvement? And do you have an example of a district-approved charter school that took same students that for some reason were not doing well in traditional school, and they were able to turn them around? Do you have any of those examples?
I do. So in district schools, I'll point to my own district, John M. S. Elementary School. Dr. Angelina Walker is the principal. We went through turnaround, and turnaround in the district is triggered by performance levels, and if a school has not increased their performance over X amount of time, typically 2 or 3 years. Our charter schools have just recently been getting into turnaround effort versus founding, right? And so I think there's University Prep did a turnaround effort of another charter school, Pioneer, and they're doing okay. I think what our challenge, to be fair, we do see proficiency in our charter schools, high proficiency. I'll also say we have charter schools that are severely underperforming right now, some within the same networks. And so what we are questioning by way of proficiency as well is, what does it mean to support kids to be excellent? Is it test scores or more? And if it's something not just test scores, then now we are starting to ask, in that self-determination vein, what is the experience our families, including our students, want to have? Because we can see success, quote unquote, on tests at the expense of other things like identity. And so we need to be critical on what we're calling success. And that's something that the district is actually focusing on right now as we rebuild our school performance framework for that reason.
Oh, I gotta ask, go ahead.
So
Y'all clap, y'all go ahead.
Roland,
You're not gonna get penalized.
Roland, so just real quick, I just want to make a distinction. There's a difference between mom and pop charter schools and these corporation, MIC charter schools is what I'm talking about. I am in full support, where's Offset? Sister, I'm in full support of this sister's charter school. Let that be clear. This is not about whether I'm anti-charter. What I am is anti-corporations that are coming in right? So there's a difference between what we did, and you mentioned it earlier, when we were in the 50s and the 60s, and we were excluded from the system. So we started churches in the bottoms of our basements, and those were the first charter schools. So I'm not anti-charter. What I am is anti-corporations that are coming and took our original idea and our innovation, and now you have groups like KIP and DSST that are run by all white males and all white females on their boards. This is the board of DSST.
But that's the point I'm raising.
Hold
up. When you mention KIP, the education curriculum of KIP is based upon the teaching methods of a black woman.
That's fine.
But
what about the discipline policies?
Hold up. Hold up. So here's the point there.
Okay.
Here's the point there. If the co-founder of KIP, who was in a classroom and he heard all this noise across the hall, and he walks across the hall and he steps in and he's seeing this sister using rap, rhyme, rhythm, teaching these kids, and they're excited and excelling, he gets the idea. That's how KIP originated. What I'm saying is, I want a black KIP with 200-300 schools.
I agree.
So, but the problem is, as I've traveled this country, I've had to deal with black folks who like, oh, hell no, none of that. And what I'm saying is, I'm over here looking at traditional schools where our kids have been going there 10, 15, 20, 25 years, and they have not improved. And folks like, hey, just keep praying, there's a new plan. And the problem is, black parents are saying, I can't wait for your 10-year plan.
So, Roland, are those public schools that you're talking about, are they properly funded? Are traditional schools and black neighborhoods...
And here's the piece.
No, I'm asking you. That's a question.
Right, but because it's not just...
I'm asking you.
It's not just the properly funding.
No, I'm asking you,
though.
Are they properly funded?
Some are and some aren't.
Okay, most are not.
No. But that's my point. And that's why I raised the question when I was in Alabama. When I asked that question when they were fully funded, they still were not doing the jobs, which then says, like, okay, wait a minute.
And where?
When I was in Alabama, in the Black Belt. Montgomery, Alabama, just elected the first black mayor, first time in 200 years. The state controls all the schools there. And I'm asking these questions because I've been in these conversations where funding becomes the issue. I've been places where Washington, D.C., where they were spending $12,000 and $13,000 and $14,000 per kid, and it still wasn't doing the trick. So the question then became, okay, what is it beyond just the money? If money is going to solve it all, here's the question. Give me the number that's going to equalize it all, and then what's the number that's trying to pay it? And that's the piece there. But I got to bring you in because you're a community school. I'm coming back to you. I want to bring you in here. What are you hearing from these parents and these students? First of all, is your school, because you said a community school, is it a traditional school? Is it a charter? Is it a magnet? What's the model of your school?
It's a district charter school.
It's a district charter school. What were those kids saying who were enrolled in your school? First of all, how many in your school?
Right now we got 122 kids, 9th grade.
What were those students, what were those parents saying as to why they sought your school out?
Yeah, and I gotta be very real. I'm not interested in having I do not want to recreate on the stage these same dynamics. I'm interested in a dialogue, in a critical exchange, and a real critique. And in fact, dichotomous thinking is either or, diurnal is both and. You can be right, and you're right, and she's right, and he's right. And that's the insanity of the system. And until we can then begin to talk about that great question, which is why, and start beginning to talk about how white supremacy manifests itself within all these folks, all these agents in the system, we're just going to keep spinning our wheels. That's just my one piece. Let me answer your question. 2, here's what's key. When you talk to the folks, and for me I use Cornell West's word, folks who are catching hell in America. When you talk to folks who are catching hell in America, we don't give a damn how the solution comes. But I'm not saying that should actually excuse us from having a critique of these oppressive systems. Because in fact, I am actually very sensitive as a black man leading a charter school in Aurora. This school is literally 6 minutes away from where I went to high school myself. For Empowered to succeed, I don't want Gateway High School to shut down. But I can't even get folks to just we actually want to partner with Gateway, but because of these dynamics, we can't even sit down and talk about how actually we can build this innovation together. So our success doesn't have to mean your denigration. One. Two, here's what's key. Not much has changed since I was in high school. I have 5 brothers. All brothers went through APS. I have a brother who's a junior right now. He's a senior actually at Gateway High School. Not much has changed, and it's the same problems. It's not whether it's charter or district. It's, wow, I got a whole lot of white teachers. 2, catching hell in America is not just poverty. It's that you can sit through 12 years in the education system. You never see anybody who looks like you. You never read anybody who sounds like you. 3, catching hell in America. You can sit through 8 hours listening to teachers lecture, never working on problems that's actually impact your community. And I used to be a big, not even used to be, I have a deep critique of charter schools because while, yes, in fact, we pay fees to the district. I wish I could pay less fees so I could do more of what we need to do. But we pay fees into the district. But I do see the ways in which actually, this is why I appreciate your distinction between mom and pop and a big CMO. I do begin to see the ways in which if we grow and grow and grow, we can create the same bureaucracy that we're trying to disrupt in the first place. And this is what I mean by, can we have a nuanced conversation?
And I wanted you. I'm coming back here, but I got to bring him in. And the reason I wanted you to speak to that, because I recently had a brother, Sean Hartnett, who's in Washington, D.C., who took over, who created a school, young black men. And in Ward 7 and Ward 8. And these were the lowest numbers in the entire city. And all these people, he caught hell trying to open a school. And after 2 years, they were able to see these same students who over here, to your point, who didn't see black male teachers, over here could not perform, would not perform, doing miraculous things over here. And he is battling his own people who want to shut him down because they say, you're a charter. And he says, if I got 150 young black boys who are now excited about school, why in the hell would you want to shut me down? And that's to me the insanity of all of this, because I start with the premise, if it's working, support it. If it's not, don't. Two things can actually coexist. We've had magnet schools now for 40 years. It's amazing how people have no issues with magnet schools. And I went to one, but they're specialized. They have different budgets. They have different curriculums. They have different standards. And we go through all of this sort of stuff. And it is crazy to me. And what I'm saying is our kids are the ones who are getting caught in this trap, because we have folks who are fighting about contracts, who are fighting about all kind of other issues, and not, is that black kid learning? I need you to step in here. I want to ask you about, what are you seeing? What are you hearing directly from black parents? What do they want? Then I'm going back to Jennifer. Go ahead.
Yes, and actually, I've been sitting here trying to digest all this conversation and everything that I've been hearing from everybody. And this is what I want to start with. I need us to step back a little bit, because here we are, panelists of adult grown-up that already went through some system, either that's a public, either that's a charter, but came out. And now we are so emotional about this conversation, and this is not about none of us. This is about our children, the children that do not have the opportunity to sit here and have their voice, parents that do not have the opportunity to be here and express their concern. For me, as far as I'm concerned, it's about the community, it's about those children. And whatever works best for those children, that's what I'm about as a leader. Now, speaking for the community that I represent, and I want us to reflect on what could we do different. If we're talking about a school system where the teachers, nobody from the system look like our children, sound like our children, and we still sit here to have this conversation and blame the system that we're not trying to do anything to change it. I think it's time for us to have more members of our community as teacher. It's time for us to have people from our community as principal. It's time for us to have people that look like us to be on the board of directors. So that way, when we take decision that's impacting our community, we have representation at the table.
I want to answer your.
Yes. So talking about choice. For me, choice is a great thing. Because I would like anything in this country. The first minute I step into the United States, I went to the Walmart trying to get a bottle of milk. I saw a bottle of milk with a red lead, blue, white, you name it. So as Martin was talking about, everything that surrounds us, we have the option to choose and to decide. So as a parent, why somebody would like to take away that choice from me? So now, as a parent, if I choose to get my kid through a public school system, great, that's your choice. If I choose to put them in a charter school, that's great. But I also want to make sure we include our children part of this conversation. They have a voice, they need to understand. So let's get them involved in this conversation, because they need to understand if I'm stepping into a charter school, what is the difference? Why my dad or my mom did not choose to send me to a different school? So for me, let's make it about the children.
Go ahead.
I wanted to answer your question about what are the parents and kids saying, and I wanted to give you, I wanted to share with you a story of particularly far northeast Denver. So are we familiar with Montbello and Green Valley Ranch in the room? Okay. And so what parents say, regardless of their race or income, I want my kid to be safe, I want my kids to get from A to B in their learning, and I want them to be healthy. What kids would add to those three is saying they want to be received as who they are, and they want to develop in their identity. And so when we ask parents in my neighborhood to choose, we had a group of parents who said there isn't a choice here that identifies those three things as parents and for my kids, so we will make our own school. And that is the story of the Warriors, okay? Warriors for high quality schools. The reason why I think that's important too is when we talk about our landscape and what's working and why not keep doing it, we are at a place, particularly in the far northeast, where we have not managed what we are doing and the impact on everything else. And we have lost the voice of our kids and students and what kind of schools they want to go to answer your question, right? And so when I think about—
haven't managed, what does that mean?
So we have the far northeast of Denver is probably where we've seen the most charter expansion opening, along with southwest Denver. And we are at a place where we have the network schools. We had a Black-run charter school open that after 3 years, after, in my opinion, not being adequately supported, shut down. In our community, Sims Fayola, we remember, right? Our community really was excited about the prospect of a boys' school that was Black-run and whatnot. What we've seen happen in the far northeast is in the beginning when our schools were failing, we shut them down and replaced them. Sometimes we called it turnaround or not, with our charter schools, and that may be okay. But now we have a place where we have 3 CMOs present within a mile of each other. So you can go to, so it's a charter management organization, it's a network of charter schools. We have DSST on either side of Pena Boulevard, for those of you familiar with far northeast, Strive, and KIP. We also now, unfortunately, because here's the other thing, I don't think it's about traditional versus charter in that sense if nothing is quality, particularly in the organization in which I'm a board member of. So, and it's not that it's not quality, the families in my community are struggling with the schools that the district run that are not doing the best for kids. And then they can choose a CMO that might, but our families feel like they're being held hostage because they can't actually choose what they want. They're choosing a school in a lot of ways that will get their kid to college. And it's not that everybody doesn't like it. A lot of families like it. But because the environment we live in, which I think is predominantly found for communities of color and Black families, they are willing to give up senses of identity and freedom to go. And that is a choice that not many people who aren't people of color ever know what it means like to have to process. And that's why we have to figure this out. The other thing is, as we open things that are quote unquote working, we are noticing that it does actually have an impact on the schools around it, so much so that we can't provide quality. So we have an issue in this district around how big or how small schools can be so that they can operate. And we need to start asking these questions because decisions aren't being made in silos, and they also aren't driven by the people who we are asking to choose.
But see,
and that's why it's a challenge for us.
And when we talk about this, again, when we talk about a school over here that is performing, highly successful, and everybody wants to go there. Steve Perry and I were talking about this here. When they opened their school, they had 4,000 people who were on their waiting list. They hadn't even seen a picture of their school. They were like, look, we know this sucks, so we want to go over here. But the thing there is, it's very simple. If you're a parent, and I'm going to this school, and none of them are doing well. And all of a sudden, I hear this one is doing better. Yes, I'm trying to go here. I mean, the reality is this here. If traditional schools were doing the absolute job, no one would be even thinking about opening charter schools because you're
That's
like
true.
because you're trying to compete with it. So the struggle here, to the point that she made, is that if there are 5 restaurants and 4 of the restaurants got bad food, we're gonna stand in line for an hour and a half at that one that has good food. Because we're saying, I'm not going to the bad food.
So what you just did, Roland, is you just explained the charter industry.
No. Actually, I just explained the education industry. That's traditional, charter, and everything, because that's the problem.
According to a Stanford study, which is considered the most foremost study in the nation, only 20% of charter schools outperform traditional schools.
Okay.
That's the facts.
Okay, and here's my deal. Keep those 20. What's traditional performing? See, again, I'm saying I'm down with what works. If it's 50 or 30 or 20, I'm cool with that.
So let me ask you a question. If you were going to take your dear mother to a doctor, and the doctor said, listen, I only have a 20% success rate, would you take your mother to that doctor?
See, hello. See, that's why the reason that don't fly.
I'm asking you.
It don't fly. I'm taking my mama to one of those 20%. That's the point. But the problem is when we say only 20% are high performing, and I'm in debates with people who want to get rid of even that 20.
But everybody can't get in that 20%. No, Roland, what you're talking about is an elitist idea.
It is? Can everybody get in a magnet school?
What do you mean, everybody?
No, are there magnet schools in this district?
No.
Hold up.
What are you calling a magnet school?
Are there magnet schools? Are there specialized schools? Do you have to apply to get in? Which means you can be rejected.
Yeah.
Which means right now in your system, there are traditional schools that you can be rejected.
No, but a magnet school is not, this is like calling a charter school a public school. So this is what I'm saying.
It is a magnet school is a traditional school.
This is what I'm saying. What we're talking about is governance, right, Roland? What we're talking about is representation.
No, we're not talking about governance. We're talking education and kids.
So the question is, do you trust white people who have been running this system for 200 years to educate your kids?
They've been running the whole system.
I'm asking you a question, a straight question, brother. If you're having a conversation about black choice, and you're not talking about black representation,
okay,
if you're not talking about
stop. I'm sorry. Let me rephrase how I started this. Roland said, I'm here for black people running charter schools for black students. I don't know which part of that is confusing. I'm real clear. What I'm saying is, which I don't quite understand why this is even a debate. What I don't understand is that if I have 2 or 3 schools that are doing the job, let them keep doing the job. If I got traditional schools doing the job, let them do the job, and we raise the standards. I don't understand why folks insist in saying, I don't even want that to even exist. That's the problem that I have. And what I'm saying is, take what is working, study, and replicate. I'm going to go here to the state's representative.
I'm sorry, and I
That's what I'm saying.
Because I think here's the distinction I just want to make and why I'm struggling a little bit. The challenge is who defines what's working. And when we talk about families making the decision. And
What's your district standard?
Well, so let me get there. So what I was trying to illustrate for you is the challenge of being forced to make a decision that people don't necessarily want to make, but it's the life or death, right, issue with going to school. When we marry it to, right, the words like freedom, the challenge for our community is we have used words like choice and freedom. However, our families and the students who have to make those choices are not the ones deciding what they are. And that is the challenge. So it's not about not replicating or who gets the test scores, because we've been through that, and it is okay. But if we are going to have a system that we say people can make choices in, but they really don't get to create the menu, it doesn't feel like a choice to them. And so when you say replicate what's working, we've done that as a district, to be fair.
Okay.
The challenge that we're having with our community, and that's why I talked about the warriors, is because sure, we have choices, sure, the school has the data to get my kid to go to college, but somebody else decided this is what I need, and if you're gonna ask me to exercise my freedom of choosing, even though that school gets kids to college, I don't choose it. And we have not created a system that has really leaned into the freedom of deciding what education is. And that's why it's a challenge. So when you say replicate, sure, we've done that as ZPS, but what we're also seeing is people not liking those choices because they didn't have a hand at building what it is. And so those conversations have to walk together. If we're gonna ask people and think about kids and families and what they want, we have to marry those conversations. Otherwise, we're gonna have tension. What we are seeing up here as a result of that, on behalf of someone who lives in Denver, this is why we are arguing. And so it's more than that to say if it's working. I think it's unfair because we haven't been able to pull that apart to understand what exactly that is, unless we're just saying pass the state test.
Yeah, but you're in a situation, James, I want to bring you in here. You're in a situation, though, where you have to establish some sense of standard. Look, I could say that I am very creative in my approach to driving. But there's a very clear standard I've got to meet to get that license. I could say I'm the most creative person in some other field, but if there's a license that has to be granted by the state, I've got to meet a certain standard. So the reality is, we live in a world where there are standards that exist. Hold on, I'll put James in. Okay. So if that's the case, and we're talking about that, how do you as a state representative deal with that where you got to have some type of standard to be able to assess, and how do we get to the point, again, where our kids are learning and parents are saying, I'm comfortable sending my child to that school knowing full well that they're going to have a shot at the future?
Gotcha. Good question. Raise your hand if you believe in success. I mean, if your hand ain't up, something wrong with you. Raise your hand if you believe in failure. Okay, that's a good. That kind of backfired on me, didn't it?
No, not that many hands. More hands for success than failure.
So when we talk about standards, and I want to tie that into answering the question, I think everybody has different definitions of what failure means. Okay, if you fail to provide what I'm asking for, that may not be a failure for somebody else, but it's a failure for me. If I want to have something for my children, again, my daughter and my son are different. They're twins, but they're different. My daughter wants to be in art. She wants to be a dancer. That's what she wants to do. If you don't provide that as an option in my community where I live, if I can't afford to move to a neighborhood where I can afford to live and they have that as an option, and if I can't afford private education, then the system is failing my daughter. Now, if you don't want your child in art, if they don't want to be in art, and there's some other option for them, and that works best for them, that's great. I think when we talk about standards, the only thing that I say is a concrete universal standard is that every child in the state of Colorado, in this country, should be prepared for college, prepared for success in life. When they get to college and they apply for that, the only reason they shouldn't go is because they don't want to. It shouldn't be because they weren't academically prepared. When we talk about choices and standards, the standards aren't just academic though. and that is critical. But what's important is that in 2017, over 7,000 students, mostly black kids, were suspended in school. Preschool through 3rd grade. So when we talk about academic outcomes in the state of Colorado or in the city and county of Denver, that is absolutely important. But one of the reasons why that kind of thing happens, one of the reasons why Aid Soul talked about this before, I mean, people being handcuffed in schools at those ages, what are those babies doing in order to get handcuffed? The standard is not only academic, the standard is cultural. So when we talk about having, now let me get to this, because I want to say something that's going to get me unelected. Me too. Yeah, let's say something. Tired of being politically correct.
It might get you more votes.
Might give me more votes. Everybody vote, please. Everybody's here. No, but in all seriousness, listen. I think it is important that we have people who look like us in leadership. I know it is. I got kicked out of every school I went to until 5th grade. The likelihood of me being on this stage is highly unlikely. But I went to a school that because I got a scholarship to a school that taught black history. It taught it every day of the school year, 180 days. I had a black woman that was the principal and a black man that was the administrator. I had never seen anything like that. At the time, we had the first black mayor of Denver, Wellington Webb. There was 500,000 people in the state of Colorado, or in the city and county of Denver. This was before Obama. I had never seen that. I didn't know it was possible. So my point in terms of standards, my point in terms of making sure that we have something like that is that we do need to have those types of leaders. But when I asked you guys earlier about failure, y'all know what I meant, even though some of y'all was being difficult. When I asked you about failure, I want the best for my children. If I take them to a school with a white executive director and my children have a white teacher, it is on me to make sure that when they get home, they learn about black history. It is on me to make sure that we take them to Walton Street, that they get a chance to see the little bit of history that we got left. I grew up here, born and raised in Park Hill, and we don't have that. That stuff, in many cases, we've been having conversations about that going away. We have to fight against that as well, because one day, we look up and the only history we have is on a bookshelf. So for me, we have to have those standards not only for our schools, but it goes back to what everybody up here has said. We have to teach our children about the way this works. We have conversations about boys being shot in this school, in this country. My son is 8 years old, and I've already had to talk to him about what to do if you see the cops. It's a disgrace and a shame that I have to have that conversation with him, but I have to have it. So what I said initially in the beginning of this conversation was that we have to change our mindsets. We have ownership of this. It is our responsibility to educate our children. If those opportunities don't exist where we have black-led schools, then you walk all up in there like you did at DSA and say, hey, my son wants to learn in this capacity, and he's going to do that. And when they see Mr. Ron Turner coming, they start sweating. Ain't that right? So in terms of standards, yeah, academic, 110%. That we don't expect anything. 80% of our kids are graduating by this time. One percentage of our schools to be blue in Colorado school performance framework. Certain level of. I want 100%.
I saw blue, green, red. I'm like,
yeah.
All these colors.
What is that? What if my children were in that 20%?
Right.
Well, they weren't learning, but 80% of the rest of the kids are doing well. I wouldn't expect my children to be in 20%, so why would I expect any of your children to be in 20%? And you shouldn't expect that either.
Wisdom, I gotta ask you this wisdom. I gotta ask you this here. Could you do what you're doing right now in a traditional school?
I'm not a fan of simple answers. There's a complicated answer to that. If that system was built for me, yes.
No, the current traditional system. No, hold one second. The current traditional system. Could you do what you're doing right now in your school in a traditional school?
I keep hearing say no, say yes. Here's my answer, if you don't mind. Because I'm going to be very specific. I don't want to be general. Go ahead. Here's what we do at our school. Of the 16 staff, 14 of the 16 identify as black or Latinx. That's one. The executive director is black. The principal is black. The board chair is black. At our school last week, 9th graders were reading about quantum physics and its birth in African origins. At our school last week, 9th graders were reading a college-level research study on transformative resistance. I could keep going with this. At our school, kids get a 4-year ethnic studies program. There's a blog called Flow where they're working on real-world projects and they're partnering with community partners. Why do I say all that? And this is my philosophy. I am not an entrepreneur. I have no interest, zero interest, in going into the system that brutalized me and my brothers and my cousins and convince. In fact, I tried that. What am I saying? I also saw how people burn. I saw racial battle fatigue. I have zero interest in that. I do not want to waste my black genius convincing folks.
So here's why I'm gonna come to you. Hold on. So here's why I specifically asked that question. It's because there are black men and women just like you all around the country who feel the exact same way, and they are actually leaving the field because folks are fighting what they want to do. But I've also talked to brothers and sisters like you who have said to me, were it not for me being able to open my own charter, I would be out of this field. And all I'm saying is, if the traditional system cannot accept your genius, then if there is a part of this available system that allows for people like you to create your own school in your own image, in your own likeness, and you can control and create the curriculum and control the contracts, absolutely 100%. I want 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 more like you. And that is the basis of this entire conversation. I want more of that. What I don't want our people to do is to fight folks like you who say, no, you should do what you do, but do it the traditional system. And that, truthfully, is what is happening in this country, in cities across the country.
But that's not what's happening on this stage, Roland. I just want to make that sure. That we're not pitting against each other.
But I'm explaining
I hear you.
Which is
what
why,
your experience is.
Which is why I created this, because when we go around this country, and I run into brothers like him who have low to mid-performing schools, who need the extra resources, I'm saying to those funders, y'all keep giving money to Ron Clark, y'all keep giving money to Eva in New York, you gave 50, 100 million there, support folks like that. Because if somebody doesn't say that, then guess what? They can wither on the vine. The problem is that the most ardent critics of cats like him are people look like us.
Let me tell you about,
and that drives me crazy.
Let me tell you about Denver, Roland. 64% of the black area of town, northeast Denver, are charter schools. And let me tell you why you feel this tension in the room around the question. 64% of those schools in the black neighborhood are charter schools. And so I have to ask myself, if charter schools are so fantastic, why don't they exist in the white area town, proliferated in that manner? Just let me land. Only Southeast Denver only has 4 charter schools. 4. We have in the black area of town 60%. So then I have to ask a question with that. And you know what I failed to do, Roland, is I failed to give my receipts up at the beginning. So I've heard a couple questions like, well, if you're a parent, if you got to fight for these schools, let me be clear. Last year, they were shutting down a school called Denver Discovery in Stapleton. We organized the community, and we told DPS, along with this sister right here, no, you're not going to close this school. See, when it was open, they opened it as an expeditionary learning school for mostly white folks. But when they ran into trouble because of the charter numbers, they started letting black kids in, and they took away the expeditionary, and then they put in the discipline. So instead of having, and that's what charter schools do. Let's be very clear, charter schools are some of the highest purveyors of the prison to preschool pipeline. These are facts. So what we did is we went in, we took over that school. Now let me give you the receipts of our school of Denver Discovery. Since we took over that school and turned it into a community school, my wife is the assistant principal. Could you please stand up, Danielle? We have a black principal. We have a black assistant principal. We have a community school coordinator that's black. We have 78% black teachers and brown teachers in that building. But more than that, what do? We brought the community in, so the community is helping to teach in that school every Friday. The brothers and sisters that teach in that school on Friday, would you please stand up? Dr. Tandabatu. This brother is a doctor from Indiana University, and every Friday he volunteers his time to teach 200 mostly black and brown kids how to do it. When you ask the question, can it be done in a traditional school? Yes, it can be done in a traditional school. I've done it.
So the question then comes in, because remember, you said
we've done it.
One second. You said 64% of the schools are charters, which means that something precipitated that.
Yes, greed.
No, hold up. No, one second. Something precipitated that. Because if those were high-performing schools, that doesn't happen. And so, and that's the point there that we have to deal with. The opening for charters is that the school is low-performing. And the reason parents are saying, yo, I want to go over here is because I'm not trying to go to low-performing school.
They closed down Montbello High School. Montbello High School was a performing school. And now what they put inside of Montbello is 5 charter schools. 4 of them are failing right now.
So, if those 4 are failing, what is the Black Denver community plan to do what you did to take them over?
Well, you make the argument, and this is what I said.
No.
You said there was something that precipitated it.
Right.
And I'm saying sometimes there doesn't need to be anything that precipitates
it,
but greed.
No.
And what happened was that charters had their eyes on that building. They took that space. They made the children fail.
No, follow me here. I ain't going. I'm not going. Hold up.
You said something precipitates it, brother.
Follow me here. I'm not looking in the rearview mirror. I'm looking in the front window. You just said 4 of the 5 schools in that building are failing. What is the Black Denver community plan to take over
community schools?
Those 4? No, I'm saying, what's the plan? Who's leading it? What's happening? Go ahead, Jennifer.
James, did you? No, go ahead. You sure? Yeah. It's funny because that's
if something
the question.
Failing, take it over. Where's the plan? Who's doing it?
I just explained to you how we did it, Roland.
No. You said how. I'm speaking of the current ones failing, not what you've already done.
Okay.
I'm saying there are 4 failing right now, and you see the 4 failing. Where's the current plan to say we are stepping up to say, give us those 4?
That's right.
That's what I'm asking. Go.
So the reason why I gave you the example of the Warriors was to actually answer your question. So they applied to be a district-run school that highlights, right, HBCU style learning and STEAM. And regardless of how you feel about Warriors, as an answer to your question, because this is the actual question many of you all know for Montbello right now, what we had to do was make sure that people could understand that they can come to the table and build something, because the culture of the district made people feel like they did not have control over their educational outcomes. And so for me, the win behind the Warriors is the district saying, we can be a district that is community-driven and supported by us to build what we want to see. My community has been demanding better for Montbello since it shut down. The truth of the matter is, we did replace it with these innovation schools I was telling you about, and charter schools. And honestly, maybe one between charter and district are performing well out there, regardless of governance type. My community knows now that they can dream. The district had to remove the barriers of pretension as well as process to say we can build. And so your question of replacing, that is what we are actively doing right now, because we demonstrated we could do that. When we left the landscape to people who didn't have the voices of the community to see what we built, we got what we have right now. And that is not good for anybody. And so for us, if we're gonna ask this question of is choice the Black choice, we have to make the choices. Otherwise, we are choosing what other people decided for us.
Okay.
And that is what we are trying to do now. Now, to answer your question too, let me just say this, because it wasn't necessarily all bad. In regards to your question of could wisdom do what he did in a traditional school, first of all, I'm not gonna speak for you. I was in a place of also trying to open, a school. Just because it was charter, it was not easy to be a person of color to try to open a charter school either, to be very clear. However, what we learned from this quote-unquote structure we have now at the family of schools is actually how to maneuver ourselves so that district or innovation or charter can be free to maneuver the way that they want to. And that's what Sol was trying to talk about with Denver Discovery. So the one thing that Denver really pushed itself to, we have the tools to be responsive. We need to challenge ourselves on imagination of leadership so that we can build it. And to answer your question, what is the Black community doing? We are rallying actually right now. And I'm proud to say that half of the reason I ran to be on school board was so they wouldn't hear another no. Because they heard no for 10, 15, 20 years when the Black community said, this is what we want.
I do have a question. The school, you said the high school shut down. What was the student performance when it shut down?
At the end of the day, I think it was about 55% graduation rate. My challenge right now is the schools that we've replaced.
Well, that's graduation rate. I'm talking about like other language, like math, language.
So
what was that?
The data, it's complicated. The test has changed 4 times. It was performing. Right. And so the challenge as we are presently, Roland, is that the schools that have we've replaced it with, and there are some charters in the neighborhood. And we saw the data come out today. We are seeing 14, 15% proficiency. So it's not actually better everywhere. There are schools. We also have the highest performing school, which is a charter school, DSST in the neighborhood. But the majority of the schools that we're supporting Black students are not performing, regardless of governance type. So I just wanted to make that point. You know, you're right in the sense of community, what are they going to do now? But our community has been agitated, but if they're not welcomed or included in a system, even if you're trying to open a charter school, which many people of color have experienced here, we can't even do what you're saying, because when we talk about what is the choice, other people are used to making that decision for us, and that is a culture shift that we are experiencing right now and have to continue to push.
But hold up. But if you, I'm gonna go to you, then I'm gonna go to James. But if you have Black folks and you have the numbers where it's performing, and you're going to a system, how then are you then mobilizing people to say, stand behind us, not stab us in the back, not fight us, not make us go through hell just even trying to get to the door? Because for me, this ain't that hard. It's not, this is not this complicated. It's not. If I'm seeing 64% of schools where most of the Black kids are going are charter schools, that means that clearly those were failing schools, which precipitated somebody flipping them. And if that's, and then it goes, again, when I keep saying what's the plan, what I'm saying is there an entity? Is there an existing group? Do you have a funding structure? Have you gathered people together who are Black and begin to say, okay, this is the system we're going to model? Do you have people in this city who have said, we visited 4 or 5 other schools across the country, and we're going to bring that back? And so when are you presenting the plan to say, if these are failing and you're going to shut them down, whatever, we want to take those over? Who is that? And how can folks say, I want to get involved in that?
Call me.
But you're on the board. I'm not talking about as a board member. What I'm saying is, follow me here. You're a board member. I ain't talking about a board member. Okay? You're the one who's voting on policy. I'm talking about the entity that's running the school. That's different. No. They can work in concert with you. What I'm saying is, you're not running that CMO, right?
So what Denver Discovery did is we took 4 to 5 parents, teachers, and school leaders to Chicago to look and see How does a community school model work?
Okay.
Just so that we're clear about community school models, it's the same thing that Bill de Blasio is opening up 100 and has ordered 100 community schools to be opened in New York. It's the same thing that Chicago got 60 community schools to be opened. So we took 4 to 5 teachers, community leaders
Got it.
to Chicago to understand, because here in Denver, most people in Denver don't even have never heard of a community school. Denver Discovery School was the first community school opened in this district. There's one open in the district next over, but not in Denver.
And is that community school outperforming the school that it replaced?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So what we're dealing with is a turnaround, right? Because
Okay.
they stripped, once the black students entered that school, they stripped all the resources from it, right? And so what we had to do is show what is a community school model that we can pull in.
Whoa, 1 second. When you say they stripped the resources from it,
Yes.
So does that mean that prior to that, the school was getting X amount of dollars and now
Yes.
it's getting this? So,
Yes.
hold up. I don't deal in general stuff. How much money was the school getting before, and what is it getting now?
Okay, so when Denver Discovery School, and my wife would probably be better to answer this question. What we know is that when it was a predominantly white school, and then the teacher, the principal messed off $500,000, right? The district gave her a $500,000 shopping spree that she went off and did whatever with it. Then they started bringing in black kids from Park Hill, to backpacks full of cash to try to make up that difference. Once that happened, then what the district started to do is to restrict the numbers to kill the school. So last year, we were getting almost $1 million more than what we're getting this year. While we're asked to educate 220 mostly black and brown students. So they stripped away almost $1 million from that school that we've had to fight, tooth and nail, that we've had to supplement with community members coming in and teaching electives. We couldn't even afford to give electives in this school. We had to have community come in, and fortunately, and this is how dope this community is, and people can criticize it all they want, but 14 different individuals and organizations came in to teach the electives, so now we have over 13 electives offered in this school, where before there was only 2.
So if you have, that's where I want to bring in wisdom, and I'm coming to you, and you do. If you're seeing this, again, I go back to, if you have charters over here that are not performing, you've got a charter over here performing, then frankly, I want to see him with 2, 3, or 4, or 5 schools. That's what I want to see. To me, that ain't hard. He may not want to do 4 or 5 schools, but I'm just simply saying, because I'm talking about capacity here.
Right.
Because again, what I can't accept failure. I can't accept our kids still having to deal with failure. So again, in terms of a community, what is the infrastructure? What is the organizational infrastructure to achieve that goal, or do you have people operating in silos? Go ahead. Wisdom.
Let me give you a
Then
concrete
you,
example
then
of
James.
this. Concrete example. Starting a charter school, and I want to be a part of Our Voices, Our Schools. Starting a charter school, and I forget which newspaper, the Park Hill, when they did that feature on what happened at DDS, I was proud. We sent that within, I'm looking at Offset might as well be up here. We sent that within our cohort, and we actually applauded that, because what we don't need, we need all of us doing what we're doing, but in a concerted, strategic way. And the honest truth is, right now, there are silos, and folks are organized in their silos, but for me, it comes down to a simple quote. A tiger does not proclaim its tigritude, it pounces. And what I wish we do less of is proclaiming our tigritude, putting our strategies all over, and instead finding time to actually align our organizations with a strategy and a sustainable plan with resources. That's what it's going, with lawmakers, that's what it's going to take. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you answered the question, which also spoke to how I opened this up. and that is the problem with this conversation on this stage and nationally. It is either or.
I don't think you've heard anybody say either or, brother. I
No,
asked
no, no, no,
Wisdom,
no, no, no.
did
One
he have
second,
any
one second.
problem,
Follow me here,
or did anybody say that they didn't want
follow
him?
me here. Somebody doesn't have to say either or for them to say either or. What I'm saying, this ain't my first rodeo. This trust me, what has been said on this stage is not like it's just Denver, unlike any other city in the country. The reality is, I've heard the exact same arguments, but what he just articulated is one of the things that is the most important thing, and that is, moving forward, how do you take individuals who say, I believe in a community school concept, high achievement. I believe in a charter concept, high achievement, and say, we can coexist, and how can we do it together to say, we are sick of this, of what's happening over here. And what I'm saying is, if there are silos, that means folks here have to break down the silos, because guess what? Him by himself, you by yourself, her on the board fighting her thing, it's going to be three different people failing and like, dang, what the hell? You have to be able to mobilize and organize. Go right ahead. And then I'm going to James.
Yeah, and
then you.
one thing I would like to add is, while we go through this process, it's obvious to all of us now that the public school system is failing our kids, the charter school are failing our kids. So what is left to parents to do in the meantime? So everything we're talking about is beautiful, that we're going to go through the process to build a coalition, to come together and figure it out. But in the meantime, we all know that we cannot fail our kids. And we need to figure out a way where parents get the power back to them. So while we all figure out the system, let's give the power back to the parent. And the only power that they have is to be able to pick. It's obvious. The example that Martin gave, 5 restaurants, 4 cook back food, obviously we all gonna go to the place that will serve me a good meal to eat. And from my community, that's what I'm educating them about, and that's what I'm teaching them about. They need to understand they have the power, and everything start and go back to them. So I'm all excited to hear about the community school. If it's working, I'll be the first one to take my kid there, because I want them to be with kids that look like them and sound like them. But if that community school is failing, I won't be even driving by. It's just a choice that I have.
Facts.
So for me, we talk about all these things, and I think this conversation has been happening for years. And I think in this country that we all live in, everything happened from the top and try to go down to the bottom. And it's time for us to start from the bottom and go down to the top.
James.
I agree with that. I would just want to ask again a question. How many of you believe that the Democratic Party in this country has served black people well? How many of you believe that the Republican Party in this country has served black people well? How many of you believe that the traditional public school system in this country has held our children to higher standards and served them well? How many of you believe the charter school system has served our children and held them to higher standards and served them well across this country? So what we're talking about is what Killer Mike says is who got the best master. For me, I look at Tyler Perry. He just opened up a brand new production film studio, acres. He owns the land. He owns the buildings. He owns everything that happens at that place. Now, in Colorado, it's very hard, if at all, you can look to see where we actually own something. And that's one of the issues that we're talking about. But the bottom line is the standard. No one has served our children well across the board. We all like to talk about, well, you know, how's the state doing in education? Man, it's terrible. How's the district doing in education? Man, it's not doing good. How's my child's school doing? James and Naomi school? It's doing all right. How's James and Naomi doing in class? Oh, they're great. Because I don't want to be someone that you would see as a bad parent. So I don't really talk about how bad the expectation is. I say that my children are doing well, but if I really looked at it and saw where they're at in a particular situation, they're not doing well. One of the biggest problems in order for us to move forward is we don't want to accept that sometimes we are not doing well. In order for us to be able to move forward, we have to understand that. It's not demonizing yourself, beating yourself up. It's talking about the harsh reality that our children are not being served well and have not. And instead of us sitting up here talking about how one does better than the other, what we have to do is come alongside this brother and say, brother, I'm willing to put it all on the line for you because I believe in what you're doing. And when we talk about being in silos, that doesn't mean like, yeah, I'll come to a rally. That means you come to me and you tell me, you know what, brother, at a state level, this is killing me. I can't move forward in a particular area because at a state level, at a school board level, at a whatever level. And we have to have people in those positions of leadership who say, hey, man, look, at the end of the day, I hope I can have a space on your couch because my family's coming over because if I lose my job, I'm coming to stay at your house. No, I'm just saying, but that's what we're afraid of losing, what we have. I'm afraid of losing my job. I'm afraid of losing my position. We can't be afraid to lose that because sometimes you have to lose to win. And that's what our ancestors believed in. They died and fought and bled. And when we get to a place where we have fought so hard to be in a place, sometimes it seems counterintuitive to do anything different. We have to be innovative in how we do that work, but we also can't accept failure in any capacity, no matter what the governance model is.
But before I go to Deborah, first off, I was there this weekend when Tyler Perry opened his studio.
Come on, man.
I talked to Tyler
You got
Perry.
one of the invites with the video? That was dope, man.
Yes.
Yeah, I need one of them. I'm not there yet.
Yes, because I text Tyler. So,
Get his number.
yes. But let me unpack that though. You said he built his own studio that he owns and controls, which is absolutely correct. But he is still operating within a Hollywood system. But he chose to take advantage of operating within a system by also creating his own. Which is how, again, I go back to. So when I talk to Steve, when I talk to Tim, when I talk to Donald Hint, when I talk to Pat with Friendship Public Charter Schools, it's the exact same thing. They are building a system within a system. And they're saying, and this is what Tyler said. Tyler said, y'all can go talk to them about Oscar So White. He said, feel free, knock yourself out. This is what we said at the BET Awards. Knock yourself out for a seat at their table. I'm going to build my own table. And what I am saying is, when I look at the Yes Network, when I look at KIP, when I look at these networks, I ask a very basic question. How is it that the largest black charter network has around 30 schools nationally? And my whole point is capacity. If I have 40 failing schools, Montgomery, Alabama, the state is over all those schools. Guess what? If the traditional school district can't figure it out, and if a black charter network comes in and they get 1 or 2 schools and they start performing, give them 3 more. And then if they doing well with 5, give them 5 more. And I ain't going, Friendship Public Charter School out of Washington, D.C. And maybe who the brother out of Philadelphia who hit us up. I'll pull up in a second. He said they had about 30 or so. I didn't even know, but that's it. And so again, what has happened though, and this is where it's the hardest thing. The people who have fought black mom and
You want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it. You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. As Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com.
Hey everybody, this is Sherry Shepherd. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered, and while he's doing Unfiltered, I'm practicing the wobble. So I am. Because Roland Martin's one, he will do it backwards, he will do it on the side. He messes everybody up when he gets into the wobble because he doesn't know how to do it, so he does it backwards. And it messes me up every single time. So I'm working on it. I got it. You got Roland Martin.
Hi, my name is LaToya Luckett, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Mac Wiles, and you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
What's up, y'all? It's Ryan Destiny, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
What up, Lana Well, and you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Hey fam, want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered, the blackest show on all of digital, cable, and broadcast. Check out our audio podcast. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. Press play.